I switched from my undergrad to my master's to my PhD, and from PhD to 3M, where I started my career. My PhD was in diamond-like carbon films, and I entered 3M and I started working on diapers. So I went from diamonds to diapers, and I knew nothing about diapers because I hadn't even seen one. When I grew up in India, people were still using cloth diapers. So I was truly somebody who had never seen this land and was navigating it.
Hello, I'm Karen Horting, Executive Director and CEO of the Society of Women Engineers. Welcome to Diverse, a SWE podcast. Today's guest is no stranger to our SWE community. Jayshree Seth received the SWE Achievement Award in 2020 and has authored the Heart of Science series published by SWE. Jayshree, a chemical engineer by training, is a corporate scientist at 3M and also 3M's first ever chief science advocate. And in this role, she studies the public perception of science and advocates for STEM fields and a robust pipeline of talent to drive innovation. I'm excited because I got to know Jayshree when she was the closing keynote at We19 in Anaheim. We hit it off, and it's been a great relationship between Jayshree and SWE ever since. Today, we're discussing the capstone volume of her trilogy, The Heart of Science, Engineering Blueprint. Jayshree, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Karen. Always good to connect with you, and I appreciate our friendship and the long-standing partnership with SWE that started in Anaheim.
All those years ago. So let's start by talking about Engineering Blueprint, which is the third installment of the Heart of Science trilogy. What was the motivation for this third book?
So, since the first book in 2020, I've really been honored by the response it received. And it was specifically on the mental models and the practical frameworks that I've developed. I draw from over 30 years of experience driving STEM-based innovation from the trenches. And we have had many discussions and book clubs and workshops that have been based on the content of the books. And then people started asking for worksheets based on these models. So all of this prompted me to create this third book as more of a guide, if you will. And we invite the readers to go through the exercises in the book. And the motivation is that someday people may confront its contents. And when they do, they will be prepared for the moment instead of being confounded by it. So unlike the first two books, this book, the third one, Engineering Blueprint, actually has a workbook component to it, if you will. So the first book, Engineering Footprints, Fingerprints, and Imprints, which was published in 2020, that laid the foundation, exploring, overarching themes of personal development, authentic leadership, making a meaningful impact, etc. Engineering Fine Print, the second book that came out in 2022, took us deeper. And this time I was encouraging us all to examine the fine print within ourselves, feelings, identities, needs, and experiences. And these can be catalysts for action and self-realization. And in this third book that came out in late 2024, Engineering Blueprint, the main motivation is to take these insights and strategies, including those that are in the first two books, and then put them into practice. So it's got, suggested reflections and actions you can take. It is designed to basically help you construct a personalized blueprint for success and enjoy this journey of self-discovery and growth. And the exercises may turn out to be validation of what you already know if you're a seasoned engineer. Or if you're starting out or mid-career, it may challenge you to grow in new ways through a fusion of, let's say, inspiration, aspiration, but rooted in practical application. And Karen, I must give a shout out to 3M's Women Leadership Forum for showing me the power of my own frameworks coming to life. They were actually the first ones to do an internal workbook based on one of the frameworks, and I was invited to speak about it. And it was just an interesting moment for me to see it, how it could come to life and all the discussion, how people were filling it out, personalizing it. So it just really reinforced my commitment for engineering these blueprints.
Well, that leads me to a follow-up question. So I know this third book was no easy task to put it together. Were you a little bit surprised that you needed to put together the worksheets and kind of the framework for using the two first books in a practical manner?
Yeah, it was very interesting to think in terms of what questions would one ask about these different insights that I've had to make sure that people have their own journey through these and arrive at whatever may be relevant insights to them. So it required me to look at my own frameworks in a different light and through a different lens. But once I got the hang of it, I think it became easier. However, just as I got the hang of it, I started thinking about the multitude of ways in which it could be addressed. So it became a research project unto itself. Where we ended up, I think, is a great balance of the questions, the lenses, and the light that you want to see this in.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so important that no matter what stage of your career you're in, that you have the tools that can help you examine things, make a leap to perhaps a next level of understanding, or just even building your own confidence.
Absolutely. So, engineering blueprint is divided into 4 sections, and each is focusing on key concepts and contexts that are essential for personal and professional development. And like you said, Karen, and it doesn't matter what stage of career you're in. So section 1, for example, has frameworks for getting the job done. So these are tips and tricks for practical things like, hey, how do I solve a problem? How do I ideate? How do I get better at communication, etc.? And I share strategies for like how to integrate logic and creativity, managing your time. In a way, these are foundational tools to excel in a career, but not to say that if you are mid-career or late stage, you have excelled in them. It's always good to have those reminders. Section 2 has frameworks for advocating for a multitude of perspectives. So here I dive into the crucial topic of breaking down barriers and managing bias and becoming a powerful advocate for change. And this is essentially to empower each one of us to do everything we can to create a more inclusive and innovative STEM ecosystem. And that, again, is relevant, like you said, for every stage in your career, because the way you can think about things changes as you progress. You know more, and then you can do more. Section 3 is about developing leadership attributes. So this has tasks and templates, focusing on cultivating the essential qualities for effective leadership. So here now you have topics like, how do I drive sustainability? How do I foster psychological safety in my groups? How do I navigate change, etc.? And then finally, section 4 is about investing in self-growth. And that's where I have tools and techniques for personal development. So now I'm talking about topics like, how do you tap into your own creativity? How do you develop resilience? How do you navigate loss? How do you prioritize self-care? So this is your toolkit essentially for continuous growth and discovery. And then throughout each chapter, I do introduce what I think are very memorable acronym-based constructs. These acronyms or acrostic frameworks basically serve as the anchor for the draft blueprint worksheet, which will guide you through the in-depth assessment and growth exercises. So it's all about providing the necessary questions. It's not necessarily about providing answers, because the right answers are the ones that resonate for the reader. And the attempt with engineering blueprint is to meet you where you are. The draft blueprints then force thinking through where you have been, where you are, and where you'd like to be. And I just love acronyms. And so these acronyms hold the key to the frameworks and the mental models in a meaningful way. And throughout each chapter, I introduce them, and they really crystallize the message I want to convey and really catalyze reflection and the empowered action needed. Maybe I can give a few examples.
I would love that. And then I want you to elaborate on what you've found most useful in your own career.
Okay, yeah. Let's pick an example that I think was relevant for my own career. So one of the acrostic framework I share is called GRANT, and it's in a chapter called Grant of an Immigrant Mindset. And the idea here is that there's a lot of articles that I was reading about the immigrant mindset, and it basically talks about the resilience that that mindset offers. And when I looked at it, I thought, wait a minute, this isn't just relevant to immigrants. It's relevant to everybody, because in this day and age, as things are changing so fast, we all feel like we're immigrants to a particular area, navigating it for the first time. And so I wanted to take it to that level. And it was also extremely true in my case, my personal career, not because I'm an immigrant to the United States, but because I switched from my undergrad to my master's to my PhD, and from PhD to 3M, where I started my career. My PhD was in diamond-like carbon films, and I entered 3M and I started working on diapers. So I went from diamonds to diapers, and I knew nothing about diapers because I hadn't even seen one. When I grew up in India, people were still using cloth diapers. So I was truly somebody who had never seen this land and was navigating it. So it was very relevant to me. So what is GRANT? GRANT is G is for grit, R is for resourcefulness, A is for adaptability, N is for navigation skills, and T is for transcendence. So grit is needed because it empowers someone to persevere through adversity and maintain that long-term focus and refusing to be sort of deterred by failures and setbacks. Anytime you're learning something new, it's critical. You may have failures, you may have setbacks, but you need grit. Resourcefulness is about creative problem solving and making the most of the available resources, right? So it's about the individuals to find innovative solutions with limited means, and you have to rely on yourself, and that's very important. Adaptability is the ability to adjust to new environments, to adjust to new circumstances, and it allows people to thrive in unfamiliar situations, to embrace change, and to remain sort of agile in their approach to problems and opportunities. Navigation skills are very important. When you go into a new area, when you go into a new country, whether you go into a new culture, it is very important to understand the underlying complex system, whether it is cultural, organizational, social, and it gets to be very valuable because now then when you know how to navigate it, you can have tremendous progress towards your goals. And then finally, transcendence is about looking beyond personal goal and embracing a sense of purpose that extends to the greater good. And that's essential because it motivates us to make a meaningful impact and contribute to not just our success, but success of the community. And in my case, it was extremely important through the initiative with SWE to contribute to the larger community of engineers and find fulfillment through my mentoring beyond my own personal success. So I think that one is really inspiring to me. Every time I'm looking at a new area, every time I'm navigating new territory, I always think about grant mindset. So that one is a personal favorite. I can share another one.
Please.
So this one also comes up a lot, and this is very specific to how I think about mentoring. And I hear a lot of advice that goes to young folks, get a mentor, find a sponsor. And I usually find myself hesitating a bit when people ask about the role of a mentor in shaping careers. It's not that I don't value the role they can play, but I specifically do not want to over-index on the importance of a singular formal mentor. And I'm not trying to be a contrarian, but I have seen that sometimes I see this immense focus on this task of securing a mentor. I need a mentor, I need a mentor, and less emphasis on the thoughtfulness regarding the process and being mindful about mentoring outcomes. And especially since having one mentor may not be the best solution at all in today's work environment. So I like to say, do good work, talk about your good work, and people will come out of the woodwork to help you. You can bet the farm on it. And what is the farm? Farm is friendships through peer partnerships, apprenticeship-like assistantship, relationships and citizenship, and the most important one, M, is for menteeship. So I always tell people, loosen the definition of mentoring, include anyone and everyone that you interact with more frequently, teammates, office mates, supervisors, managers, friends, parents, siblings, spouse, children. I mean, you and I have talked at length about how my young adult kids continue to play a critical role in my development. So I think it's important that you don't subscribe to finding a single person who can offer everything a mentee needs. If I were to pick a useful model, for me, it's farm. I've realized that we need to be open to learning from our everyday interactions. And many, I believe, are truly, hashtag moments that mentor. And so that is important to me. And over my career, I formed friendships through these peer partnerships, the chemists that I worked with to make these materials that I know solved the problem that I had. Or there's a piece of equipment that I wanted to use, but I didn't want to waste someone's time. I just said, I will help you. And I just became their apprentice as they were using this piece of equipment, and I learned everything about it. Relationships are those which you have to have with those people who are within your in-group, in other groups, and with hierarchy, so you can build a social capital. And citizenship is about giving back. If you are only about me, and not the we, then people notice. And so citizenship is important. It helps you build these mentoring relationships. And finally, menteeship, like I said, working with and listening to, learning from everybody around you. And I'll tell you, if you go through the book, you'll see all these different examples of these acrostic frameworks, and these words can be very memorable. I mean, I've got one in there which actually directly relates to the feedback that I got from my kids. When I wrote the first book, Karen knows this, we were so excited about it, and I told my kids, and my kids were, yeah, that's great. And I'm like, what? And my daughter said, but mommy, it's something that we would expect out of you because you're a good writer. And I know you were always writing these essays and coming up with all of this. So she kind of showed me the mirror and said, it's not outside your comfort zone. And so here's my own teenage daughter telling me, and I, with my menteeship years, said, you know what? Maybe they're right. It was a little bit of a letdown, but I was like, yeah, I mean, I write, I love writing. So maybe it's not outside of my comfort zone. So one of the chapters in there is called Score. And I would encourage your readers to read that one, because that is about how I truly stepped out of the comfort zone and I put a song out in the world. I kid you not. There's a song, and my kids were then scared of me because that is definitely outside my comfort zone. So throughout the books, I do share my own stories about my kids and the challenges and triumphs and stuff like that, because I want to offer authentic guidance to author your own story. And one more thing, Karen, if I may mention, was that it was extremely validating that some of my mental models and frameworks were meaningful, that professors like Rita McGrath from Columbia and Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School actually collaborated, and we put joint articles out there. Maybe we can put the link in the show notes, but it just showed me that they were practical, actionable, pragmatic, and so they really resonated.
Yeah, well, I love that. I do remember the song. So to all of our listeners, I can confirm there's a song out there. And I think you've given me my word for 2025, which is grit. I was texting somebody today about some challenges, and now I'm like, nope, I've got grit, and we're going to get through this. And you mentioned psychological safety, and I think if you could maybe just elaborate a little bit on that, of what advice you have for those in leadership roles to create that psychological safety.
Yeah, I think if you were to read Professor Amy Edmondson's books, and you'll see that psychological safety is not about creating an environment where we're not promoting real work and stuff like that, and authentic feedback and all. It's just that people feel like they can bring up what they are thinking about and be very open about fears, open about concerns, and have discussions without feeling like they will be penalized for bringing it up. So when we were discussing psychological safety, I brought up communication as a very, very important aspect of it. And Professor Amy Edmondson agreed. And I told her my philosophy around leadership communications. And then we published this article. And it emphasizes that leaders need to, make sure that they are understanding the pulse of the organization as they're communicating so that they don't come across as tone deaf.
Thank you for that, because I think right now in the world we're living in, this is critically important for any organization that wants to continue to be innovative. So as you're completing the trilogy, reflecting on the 3 books, what key messages do you hope readers will take away that might transform their approach, whether as engineers, leaders, or individuals?
Honestly, since you brought up the times we live in, I would say that the most profound thing that I can reflect on after completing this trilogy is that one person can make a difference. I think we go through our lives thinking one person can't make a difference. But remember in 2020, July, when I first gave you the call that I have this idea that we're going to take all these essays that I write and we should publish it. And you said, done, Jayshree. And it was because we were all feeling like we needed to do something. 2020 was a tough year. And then Memorial Day weekend was extremely rough. Raw and revealing events happened. And then everybody was wanting to be productive with purpose. So the first book comes out. And then in 2021, when things start opening up, I get invited to Georgia Tech to give the Silas Ethics Lecture. And out of the hundreds of colleges, the first scholar from the proceeds of our book could have been going, guess where they were going? Georgia Tech. So it was like literally a sign from above. I get to meet this person. And that's the moment where it hit me, that here's the beauty. One person can make a difference because one person takes a step and others join in. You joined in, Sui joins in, we published the book, and then the people who bought the books joined in. And as a result, we could then have this first scholar. And so here, I made a difference in somebody's life. How profound is that? And that was just one person taking a step. And so that's what I say. That's the most profound lesson I've learned. So take that step, whatever it may be. If it's early in our journey, I say expand your exposure, your education, your environment during that formative meandering. If you are in mid-career, think about the biases and the boundaries and the barriers and the beliefs that are holding you back as you navigate this road of discovery. And if you are late career like me now, you are on the path of enlightenment. Step out and light the way for others. And as more of us do that, I see a robust pipeline of talent. Talent that will challenge the constructs and dismantle the archetypes and shatter the stereotype of who enters, who persists, and who excels in STEM. And we need all the creativity and ingenuity we can muster to address the problems that face society, that face humanity. It's going to take us all. And what better than a problem-solving mindset to approach it and make a brighter future for all? So I really wish and hope that as you read the trilogy, by the final page of the last book, you will have a tangible blueprint for a joyful and purposeful journey, developing your skills, nurturing your talent, building your expertise, and cultivating your mindset. And that is the real STEM, like I say. You heard it here first. STEM, skills, talent, expertise, mindset. Let that be the heart of science.
I love what you said about we need everybody to solve these grand challenges. And I think your willingness to share what you've learned along the way is such a blueprint for others, right? Especially for those of us who are kind of in that fourth quarter of our career. to not be afraid to share what we've learned, to do some mentoring, to do some coaching, and to just put ourselves out there a little bit more.
Absolutely. Well said. And I think it's so empowering, but it's also fulfilling because you see more than just you. You see that you are helping the tribe, you're helping lift all boats. And that's so important, especially as we enter this phase of our journey.
Well, before we leave today, I know some of our listeners are excited to connect with you at SWE's We25 Global Conference this October in New Orleans. Having spoken at last year's event here in Chicago, where I'm located, I'm curious how you approach thought leadership opportunities like conferences, maybe differently than your written work.
Yes, looking forward to it. For the last 2 years, I've specifically shared actually my frameworks at the global conferences. So 2 years ago, I shared the framework on training your adult voice. As adults, we actually struggle to share our voice. Kids, they're so adept at using their voice. Adults, we sometimes have to reconnect with ours because our voice often gets, dimmer and duller as we grow older. So I talked about what I call the adult framework. It's access your voice, develop it, use it, lend it, and then watch it transcend. And I've been very fortunate to experience this journey, listen, learn, lead, liberate, and be part of the legacy. And then last year, again, it was full house, Karen. Thank you to everyone who showed up. And some of the people had to be turned away. It was so packed. And here I talked about the framework for personal branding. What's your vibe? And it was very, very popular. So vibe, I created this acrostic based on what I thought brands are and then what personal branding should be for engineers, for technical employees. And it's basically voice and visibility. Very important, not just to have your voice, but also where are you visible? Image and impact, backstory and behaviors, and experience and exposure. So that was a really good one. And in New Orleans this year, I'm excited to share yet another framework. It's an acronym as well. And this one is about thought leadership and why it's important. Why is thought leadership important? How it helps you. And it's a very straightforward framework, and it will hopefully jumpstart your thought leadership journey if you are thinking about it. And to your questions, Karen, these conferences are just great. Of course, they're great from a very, very practical standpoint that you can get a job. But it's way more than that. And it's important regardless, again, of the stage of the career you are in, because here's what you get. You get the pulse. You connect with peers. You get to invest in professional development. And above all, you gain perspective. All important perspective that holds power. So I use these exactly for that. If I'm going to be mentoring, if I'm going to be coaching, if I'm going to be partnering, if I'm going to be exchanging thoughts, I need to know the pulse. I need to know the community of peers. I need to invest in professional development, and I need to gain that perspective. So that's how I use it in my thought leadership journey. And then if things that I learn become rich fodder for subsequent frameworks that I develop. So that's very critical for me. So I hope people stop by my presentation, and please bring your books. I will bring my good pen and you can get it signed. And I really hope to see you there.
And I can tell all of our listeners that Jayshree does make good on her promise to sign your books. She signed all of mine for me last year in Chicago. And I'm just so excited that we're going to have you back at We25, inspiring the next generation, the current generation, and all generations, because I think your example of leading, of giving back, of helping others is something we really need more of. So, Jayshree, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to remind everyone listening that you can get a copy of the Heart of Science Engineering Blueprint or the others in the trilogy on Amazon. And like the previous editions, all proceeds of this book and anything in the trilogy go toward the Jayshree Seth Scholarship for Women of Color in STEM, administered by SWE.
Thank you, Karen, for having me. I hope the listeners would order their copies of the book from Amazon. And please, please don't forget to give a 5-star review. It's really a win-win since all proceeds, like Karen said, go to the scholarship. And it isn't just about what you take away from the books, but also what you give back. And the gift of education, I'm sure Karen agrees, it's the best gift you can ever give.
I agree. And for listeners out there who maybe if you've got a mentee that you're helping, I think a copy of the books would be an awesome gift to your mentees. So with that, I'm Karen Horting, and from all of us at SWE, thanks for listening.